Hey, did you all get Highlights magazine when you were a kid? I don't know if it was a magazine or it was more like a pamphlet. That's kind of the way I remember it. But it came out maybe every week, and they would give it to us at school. I think third grade, fourth grade, they would give us our copies of Highlights, and we'd take it home with our little packet that we had to show our parents. And I liked it. I thought it was cool getting Highlights magazine. I don't remember what the articles were or what I learned from it. The only thing I remember is that there was a very simplistic comic strip that was in every single one called Goofus and Gallant. It was a 2-panel strip. And on the left side, you would see Goofus in a given situation, and he would always botch it. He was a jerk. He was a sociopath. Surely that kid is ticketed for maximum security prison. He's just awful. But then on the second panel, you would see his brother Gallant in the exact same social situation, doing the thing that was right and self-effacing and wise. And so on the one hand, it's kind of an interesting format because it's sort of like the structure of Proverbs in the Bible. So I guess that's good. I like the Bible. I like Proverbs. And the fool acts thusly. The wise person acts in this other way. It's a great contrast. Also, maybe at times these comics were a little bit heavy-handed in terms of the absurdity of Goofus's behavior and the absurd, almost problematic niceness of Gallant's behavior, but I'm going to give you a few examples here. Okay, here's one where mom's playing bridge. She looks like she's from the Lucille Ball era here. And Goofus comes up in the first panel. He's like, let me see it. And he grabs a card out of her hand. You jerk, that ruins bridge. Now everybody knows. And then over here, we got mom with her, she's taking her gloves off so that she can better handle the cards because mom would wear gloves to bridge. And Gallant asks, he's like, may I see the card? Interesting. Here's another one. Some pretty lady comes to visit at the house, and she's all gussied up, and she's got her little handbag. And Goofus, little jackwagon, walks right up. He's like, hey. And he just grabs her purse, and he's like, my, you have nice things in your purse. Hey, there's lady stuff in there. What are you doing, you little monster? Get out of that. But then in the next panel, here's Gallant, and he sees that Mrs. Green has left her purse on a chair unattended, and that concerns him. That's a safety risk. And so he grabs it without opening it and says, here's your purse, Mrs. Green. What a nice young man. Oh, this one's troubling. Squirrels are afraid of Goofus. Like, they just know. They can tell by his twisted up, evil, ugly little gremlin face that he's all trouble, but squirrels eat from Gallant's hands. Do they really? Okay. Here's another one. This is from December of 1951. This year, Goofus says, I'm going to get my daddy to give me more money to buy things. And then in the other panel, Gallant's like, I'm going to try to use my money carefully and save more of it in 1952. That Gallant is such a nice boy. He's like exactly what every good American hoped that their 75-year-old bridge partner neighbor lady would be like when she came over for cocktails. So well behaved. But that Goofus, he is nothing but trouble. The downfall of society, if I do say so myself. Okay, well, actually, I do like the way Gallant acts way better. I am repulsed by the way Goofus acts way more. But how far can we really take stuff like this? This very simplistic, good, bad, naughty, nice thing. We have to acknowledge, right, that Highlights is called Highlights for kids. It's for children. It's meant to boil down more complex social things that later you understand why into just simple do this, don't do that, say this, don't say that kind of broad strokes. And there is certainly a place for that, but we know that behind each one of these 2-panel comic strips, there's a complexity of perspective that is there, that as you grow and you think about it, you're going to be able to evaluate more robustly and hopefully get to a place where your behavior is a reflection of this deep well of values and principles that are good, that inform good behavior. Likewise, in the Bible, there are definitely parts that are just very, very simple. This is bad. This is the kind of thing Goofus would do. This is good. This is the kind of thing Gallant would do. Be like Gallant, don't be like Goofus. But then there are other parts where you get way more into the motivations and the principles and the theology and how the character of God informs how people act and how they prioritize things. And those are harder and more complex and can be a little bit intimidating, but it's sort of the natural evolution of growth in any subject matter, growth as a human, that you get into the trickier stuff. Well, in Matthew chapter 24, we're about to run into another parable that dovetails off the back end of the previous parable that on its surface looks like it could be as easy as a Goofus and Gallant 2-panel comic strip. But when you think of it in the larger context of Matthew 24, the motivations that underlie behaving like the Gallant character in this parable and the motivations and assumptions that underlie behaving like the Goofus character in this parable are vast. And so over the next few days, as we break this thing down, we'll try to appreciate it on the very simple, very easy to understand Goofus and Gallant level, but we're also going to try to dig way down deep into the complex level that causes Jesus to tell this parable right here in relation to the other things he's been saying in Matthew chapter 24. Here is how the passage goes. And you know what? I'm going to back it all the way up to the one that we covered yesterday because it all flows together. So here's the one we covered yesterday. Jesus says, "Therefore keep watch, because you don't know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you don't expect him." Now here's the new stuff that we're starting on today. Verse 45. "So who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It'll be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he'll put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, 'Oh, my master is staying away a long time,' and then he begins to beat his fellow servants and eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he doesn't expect him, and at an hour he's not aware of. He'll cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Okay, that "cut him to pieces" phrase, like, we're going to get to that. I understand how that one might jump out at you and be like, "What? I don't really like mental images of Jesus cutting people to pieces." All right, hey, I hear you on that, and we are going to tackle that maybe in a day or two here. But the Goofus and Gallant dichotomy is very, very clear here. This is a 2-panel parable, where on the left side you have the fool, you have Goofus, who's like, well, I've got some responsibilities here to my master. I got work to do and things, but I'm not going to do it because he's not around and he's not looking. Goofus screws around and acts like a big drunk jerk who hits people when the master of the house isn't present. But then in the second panel, you get Gallant keeps watch and does responsible things and cares for the servants when the master isn't present, just in the same way he would if the master were present. It's very simple. One of these is the actions of a fool. The other of these is the actions of a wise man. Or put another way, in the larger context of Matthew 24, the fool is the one who just says, I want to make myself feel good. I want to do the things that make sense in the moment. I'm not aware of or even thinking about the bigger picture of the unfolding of history or the passage of time or where all of this is going, and those underlying assumptions cause me to do things that are dumb and leave me vulnerable and inattentive. Whereas the wise person says, in light of the unfolding of history and where everything is going and who God is and his character and the broad strokes that he's described how things will unfold and time out over history, it would make sense for me to be attentive to what's going on and to use my resources and my position and my influence in a way that's in keeping with the values of my master, should my master return anytime soon. Again, this is the easy part. This is the Santa Claus naughty and nice part. This is the Goofus and Gallant. It's just so dang simple. Anybody can get it part. Maybe the actual execution and actually doing the right thing when it comes to living out the Goofus and Gallant lessons is a little bit trickier, but getting it, that's not hard. What I want to work on tomorrow, and probably the day after that as well, is I want to think about this motif of the servant. That comes up so much, and it seems to have some thematic consistency throughout the book of Matthew. And so thinking about how people would have heard the term servant versus how we hear the term servant is going to help us understand the deeper levels of meaning and assumptions that would come in hearing this passage for the original audience and for us. And then I want to consider more deeply how this parable about the wise servant dovetails with the previous one. And I want to look at the big picture of Jesus' flow of thought here, because remember, all of this conversation is still flowing out of the disciples asking him how the end of time is going to work out and when the Son of Man, that's Jesus, is going to return. And Jesus gives an answer that maybe wouldn't be perfectly satisfying for people who want specifics, but that gives enough big picture stuff to tell people, it's coming. There's an end to history, and therefore there is a right way to respond. So there's definitely a pivot that has happened here in verse 42 with the word, and I'll say it again, therefore, that gets us into this stretch of thought with these two parables. And next time around, we'll see if we can go deeper than the Goofus and Gallant level and get into the underlying assumptions and ideas that draw Jesus to this conclusion. And that is all I had for today. Matt, this is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.